Can you have a look at the manifest for me and tell me 298383 is on there?
Hello everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar brought to you by IPWEA and the SLSC program. For those who may have just joined us, please have a look at the housekeeping slide on your screen. It will help us greatly if you can complete your name and particularly what state you're from and your organisation as we go through on the chat and question session. This webinar is the third in the series brought to you by IPWEA and the SLSC program. The first of these was about 3 weeks ago on the roadmap, which is the foundation document that has underpinned all of the SLSC work since it was released in December last year. The second webinar, which was held a week ago, presented by Bryan, dealt with the draft model public lighting specification, and this particular webinar is addressing the draft model public lighting controls specification. My name is Robert Fuller. I'm the CEO of IPWEA Australasia, and it's our pleasure to have you here joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on your location, for this particular webinar. We could not have had this webinar without the support of the Australian Government, the Department of Environment and Energy, and in particular the E3 Committee, who operate not only at the federal level, but in every state and New Zealand as well. They've made this series of webinars possible as a free service to the industry to help advance the rollout and uptake of LEDs and smart controls across Australia and where appropriate for New Zealand. So we thank them very much for their support and ongoing contribution to advancing the SLSC program. The SLSC program is governed and managed by the organisations on your screen at the moment. This forms the SLSC Council, and indeed both from corporate as well as leading peak industry bodies, we form the program and the reportability and accountability for the SLSC program in developing products and tools such as these two specifications that we're about to speak of. The Council is underpinned by the TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, and you'll see here some of the world names who have joined the TAG as our expert technical advisors in the systems and products we're producing for the industry. Indeed, the presentation and specification from last week dealing with the lighting controls specification has already gone out to all of the TAG and the SLSC Council members for comment, and this peer review process is a very important part of what SLSC does and certainly underpins everything that IPWEA does. After today's webinar, within a week, the specification for smart controls will also go out to the TAG members and the Council for their peer review and commentary before going out further to all of industry for comment. This is part of our consultation process and is a very important element of that. Our presenter today is Mr. Bryan King. Bryan is Director of Strategic Lighting Partners in New Zealand, and for those of you who attended the SLSC conference in Brisbane a couple of weeks ago, you would have seen Bryan doing a number of presentations, and for that we thank him very much. During Bryan's presentation, he'll be breaking about every 10 minutes to allow a response to questions and chat that will come through from you. We would ask and encourage you to put your questions to us during Bryan's presentation. Don't wait just for the 10-minute break. So if you could put them through to us, we have moderators on standby, And when Bryan breaks, and he'll be doing 3 breaks during his presentation, we will then be able to answer your questions at that point in time. So please, we look forward to that, and your engagement and questions are very important as we go through the process. Hope you enjoyed the webinar today, and we certainly look forward to working with you as we've been doing with a number of you already in developing up these 2 standards. Bryan's based in New Zealand. There'll be a short pause while we transition from Australia to New Zealand in presentation, and I'd like to welcome Bryan to take over and go through the webinar for you on the model specification for smart controls. Thank you, Bryan.
Oh, hello there, everyone. Welcome to the Public Lighting Controls Specification webinar. We have online today a broad range of participants. Roughly half are councils and roughly half, about 10% consultants, 15% are contractors, and roughly a quarter are suppliers of luminaires and controls. So welcome to you all, and we hope you find the webinar useful. What we're going to talk about today is the control specification. What is it? Why is it useful? Who should be using it? What are the key features? And very importantly, what are the key issues for consultation? Because we certainly are looking for your feedback as questions today and subsequently to follow when we go out for public consultation. As mentioned earlier...
Sorry, Bryan, you don't have your video on.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I was just trying to say you don't. Yes, that's right.
I do have it now. Thank you very much for that. It's hard to see from this end. So the foundation document that underpins the model specifications for both LED lighting and for controls is the Street Lighting and Smart Controls Roadmap, which was published in December. Many, if not most of you, will already have this and hopefully will have read that. If not, please take the free download up on the screen at the moment. This is the guiding document that we are working to over the next 2 years for the SLSC program to deliver the various document specifications and the like. So what the research for the roadmap certainly determined was there was an urgent need for guidance documents for both LED luminaires and in particular smart controls as an emergent technology area, and that's what we are intending to deliver as part of the SLSC program.
Bryan, we can't see your presentation now.
Can you see it now?
No.
Oh dear. I don't know what's happened. Could you see it earlier?
Yes, your video replaced it.
I made no changes. Can you see it now?
Right, it's Robert here. We're just looking into this right at the moment. If we could just bear with us for a moment, please.
Certainly.
I think by all means continue your introduction because you can catch up on the slides.
Yes. Okay, that's great. So that was the roadmap. The timeline for consultation and release. The development stage was with the technical advisory group and council members of several months ago and earlier as part of the roadmap. That's been completed. The model specification will be released later next week to the SLSC council and technical advisory group members. And as you're aware, if you attended the model specification for LEDs last week, that is already out for consultation among the SLSC and TAG members. So we're hoping to conclude consultation around the end of April and incorporate the inputs and advisory inputs and influences that we have and get ready to release a document, a model specification on smart controls by the end of May.
Bryan, you need to share your screen at your end if you could, please.
excuse me, I will do that. I haven't had an invitation to do that, so let me try and see how I can do that. Excuse me. Stop sharing screen. Oh, I'm not showing anything. Is that shared screen, or is it just shared my video?
That shared your screen, but now you've got to put into presentation mode.
Okay, that's terrific. So that's great. So we've got it now up on screen?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Sorry about that. So we're just heading backwards. We talked about public consultation, and that would be released at the end of May. So what is the model public lighting control specification, and what are we trying to achieve? We're looking for a guidance document that provides councils and DNSPs as the procurement agencies the ability to compile a procurement document tailored to your needs. It's not a specification until it's customized. It's an advisory document allowing you as a procuring organization to customize to exactly what you want, suits your region, be it large or small, urban or rural, and to procure the requirements that are right for you. It's not a standard. The standard is a general document suitable for all. This is tailored and customized for your needs only. And very importantly, it needs to be harmonized with technical standards that are prevailing on design, equipment, performance and safety, as well as industry norms for availability of products and the realities of the marketplace, both economic and technical. So the key features that the model specification is written around is that it's technically non-prescriptive. Very important. It defines the outcomes for performance rather than trying to prescribe the technical engineering inputs. We believe that's best left to industry as the engine room of innovation to provide the how, but what the model specification needs to define, and define well and clearly, is what councils and DNSPs require from their controls. Very important that the document is commercially and technically neutral. It is not picking winners. It's leaving that to the best value procurement processes to define who will be the winner of the tender process. The process is very flexible and supports innovation, so it's not designed to preclude new ideas that may be emergent, rather the reverse. And in terms of linking in with procurement processes, it supports life cycle cost analysis backed up by net present value financial analysis over the full total cost of life, total whole of life of the asset and the infrastructure. The model specification needs to be a living document and needs to have ongoing updates. As technology shifts, there will be a need to update as time goes on. And importantly, this is being developed in tandem with the model specification for LED lighting, and the two work hand in hand in terms of some of the features that they need to coincide on. The benefits of the model specification are to drive competition, to make the procurement process supplier friendly, so that there will be very much a competitive marketplace within the given public lighting procurement process. In order to save time and money for tenderers and for the tendering parties, and to improve the outcomes due to competitive processes. The model specification is designed to preclude reinventing the wheel rather than going down the same path again and again. And also there's certainly apparent in the marketplace some dysfunctional specifications and supplier written clauses and requirements in specifications that really shouldn't be there. So it's looking at a level playing field in a robust and transparent and auditable way, which supports the requirements for public sector probity in procurement. Particularly important now that many of the councils are getting together and looking at aggregated procurement. The dollar values go up, therefore the requirements for due process are even more important. And hopefully, as an overarching statement on this particular area, to try and to eliminate and avoid the tender fatigue that's sometimes in the marketplace with an overly broad range of different requirements and different needs for no particularly good or logical reason. So where have we got to in terms of the international influences? What is impacting upon this Australia-New Zealand document? And the answer to that is there are many, there is a broad range of influences out there in the marketplace, but none of them are particularly accessible. Much information is available in a fragmented way, and what we have tried to do is to scan the major operators around the world to look for the positive aspects that we could take up and pick up from, and to amalgamate them into an Australia-New Zealand specific document that brings the best of all worlds. Possibly the leading light worldwide is the US Department of Energy funded and sponsored group called the Municipal Solid State Lighting Consortium, MSSLC for short, who have pioneered model specifications for some years, and very recently have developed smart lighting control systems. Lightsavers Canada is another program that has a strong reputation, and we've supported that with various other items from Europe, European Union and European normal design standards, and should mention the TULP specification for interoperability. It's not yet launched as a final specification, but certainly has been available for accessing various inputs, and we have done so. So it's very much an internationally aligned document with best practices from around the world, but tailored for Australian and New Zealand conditions. The overarching principles behind the model specification is stepping back from the controls systems themselves into lighting systems. This is the terminology that's being used worldwide now by the premier standards development bodies around the world. The IEC as the international pinnacle, supported strongly by ANSI, American National Standards, and CEN for European standards out of Brussels. And there are a range of guidance elements that we have used in our document, some of which are not yet published, some of them are still in discussion stage, but nonetheless they provide some excellent inputs to get those sort of international harmonization that will inevitably be required. Even to the extent of terms and definitions, there is much uncertainty in a developing technology area, and issues such as the compatibility of elements of the system. Will they coexist together and not interfere with each other? Will they be interoperable? Will certain parts be interchangeable? We've captured the definitions of these items and woven them into the model specification as options for that can be elected by the procuring bodies. Cybersecurity is a very important issue, fairly obviously and clearly. That is really quite a new area to most people who've been involved in the street lighting infrastructure area. We have some advisory input on that and some elective options. Also reliability in a systems sense. How does one define reliability of a series of elements that come together to form a system? We have some advisory notes on that. And also, and ultimately, performance. We're about outcomes, we're about defining the performance of a system in both its various functional elements, such as the speed of operation, which is known as latency, the various features and that the functionality that can be provided, and also importantly on an energy aspects, what is the system's energy use and what will be the outcome of linking various parts together, and also an emerging issue of standby power, which is by no means a small issue these days. So we're linking in with these credible international developments, albeit some of them are not yet in their finished state, but they are providing some excellent guidance material which we're taking full opportunity to weave into our model specification. This is a rather important slide in terms of highlighting the complexities that we all facing in dealing with smart lighting control systems. So overall, what we're looking for is a technology neutral outcome, and the outcome based is what we are trying to achieve. We are non-prescriptive about the communications technology platform, and that's an area which is causing a lot of uncertainty, a certain amount of confusion, and a lot of learning needs to be invested in the differences and the benefits and the challenges of various communications approaches. The table on the screen illustrates on the left-hand side the different types of communications platforms, and the model specification accommodates all of these. Basically, we're looking at power line, we're looking at radio frequency in its various options, short range, long range, narrow, ultra narrow band, etc. But also there is a new contender coming through, hybrid systems, which blend the elements of different types of communications platform in order to provide a tailored outcome for a given region. So the model specification is not picking winners in terms of which approach is better or not for a certain application. It's really about finding the most appropriate communications platform for a given job for a given client region. So there's certainly advisory elements in the model specification in the form of drop-down boxes providing guidance to users so they can select the most appropriate briefing documents and outcomes that they are looking for. But essentially it's challenging the suppliers to provide their best options to deliver upon the clearly and concisely defined needs of the user and procuring council. So this would be a good time to take some questions. It's a very meaty slide, and I'm sure there will be some issues and questions that emerge from that. So Graham and Godfrey, as my colleagues, could you read out what some of the questions might be, please?
Sure, we have a number of...
Graham. Oh, go Graham.
We have a number of questions, Brian. I'll start with Vimal Vinodun from Ryde, the city of Ryde in New South Wales. He says the field of smart controls is moving so quickly, particularly with respect to the different communications approaches that we have here on slide 15. I'm wondering how often the model specification is going to be updated to deal with this. We had a similar question from Brisbane a few minutes ago.
Okay, it's an extremely pertinent question, and there isn't a definitive answer to that, but let me say that it's a very fast moving area, and literally month by month major new technology advances are happening and being announced, and the model specification will need to be updated at a certain point when significant advances in technologies actually occur, which will have an impact upon the need to procure items in Australia and New Zealand. So it won't be on a regular, I would not imagine it would be on a regular time base, like 6-month or yearly basis. It would be on an as and when basis when there is a critical mass of technology advances requiring an update.
So there's another question from Terry Howard. And he's saying, oops, where is it now? It's just moved on. Throughout Australia, the DNSBs all have a different take on smart controls, a different approach on smart controls. How can IPWEA assist this process to ensure their incumbent systems will talk or handshake to the new proposed systems?
Well, that's an important consideration. As an overview comment, the very idea of a model specification promoted and developed by an independent professional organisation such as IPWEA is to act as a non-aligned party that can come up with a specification document that is acceptable to a number of disparate parties, such as both buyers and sellers and vendors from different areas and different geographic areas from as a supply country. So it's a challenging thing to try and do, and the consultation side of things, we hope or we intend, will be a big part of that, seeking out the likes and dislikes of those various parties and trying to navigate a way through which will come up with a document that provides options which are acceptable to the vast majority of those different stakeholders. The on-controls in terms of the ability to work together, the TELC consortium, as mentioned earlier, is an organisation internationally that's looking to harmonise and specification at the top level, at the software level or the user interface level, which will allow different systems to be procured, and suppliers, products A will work with supplier B and C, etc., under a TELC compliant result. So certainly when that specification is published, that will be a significant part of the SLSC program. As mentioned, it's not yet been formally launched to the marketplace, but that will be a key element in addressing Terry's question in terms of the issues about acceptability to disparate parties.
So, Bryan, we have a comment from Chris Johnson at Talensa, who I think challenges us, perhaps quite rightly, on one of the comments we've made here about ultra-narrowband, just pointing out that it can be self-healing if there are multiple base stations. And I think, all of these areas are open for discussion and debate, but we'll just take that as a comment for now. We have another question from Scott Holland at Brisbane City Council, who says the 7-pin NEMA receptacle is an attribute that many Australian projects are now starting to specify. What about the power supplies? We heard at the conference about the benefits that Georgia Power is getting from specifying DALI-compatible drivers.
Yes, that's a very important issue. In terms of the internal communication device protocol within the luminaire, there are two options, DALI and 0 to 10 volt DC. There is a strong groundswell internationally towards DALI as a digital addressable lighting interface, and that has a broad number of asset management attributes that many large procurers such as councils and in particular DNSPs are taking up as the ability to actually inventory and identify a broad range of complex issues regarding the luminaire, and the control system can be stored and accessed. So it's an important issue. In terms of the model specification, we have options for both the traditional or more the older 0 to 10 volt DC analog and DALI, but there is a strong groundswell of support towards DALI, but it's up to the incumbent, the procuring council or DNSP to make that choice according to their needs, but certainly there is a bias towards DALI as time goes on.
Bryan, there's a last question that Kudus Waziruzada would like to put to you verbally. So Kudus, would you like to turn your microphone on now?
Okay, I've done that. Thank you very much. Bryan, I have a question regarding one of your slides which said that it supports life cycle costing or analysis and net present value analysis. So what do you mean by the specification supports these two items?
Right. In terms, we haven't got to the slide yet, but in terms of the procurement side, rather than the technical side, but the procurement and probity side, how does one define the pricing side of things? Now, is it capital cost, in other words, the cost on day one, or is it the cost in a life cycle basis spread over the intended life of the asset, which may be 10, 15, perhaps 20 years. So we're coming to that stage, Curtis, but it's essentially what it is we are looking at whole of life costs rather than costs, or prices, I should say, in order to determine the best value options in a tender process. So it's looking at the pricing analysis over whole of life. It's really our summation of that.
Okay, thank you.
Bryan, thank you, Kudos. If you could remute yourself, Kudos. Bryan, I think it's time we moved on to the next session.
Yes, indeed it is. Yep. Thank you, Robert. Okay, moving on. So the model specification supports innovative business models. The traditional capital expenditure model, of course, is supported, and that is still highly valid, but there are a number of new approaches coming through in terms of performance contracting models, sometimes known as energy service companies, energy performance contracts, public-private partnerships, but focusing in on controls. The outsourced services generally known in the lighting and the street lighting game worldwide as lighting as a service or network as a service. And lighting as a service is encompassing luminaires, but network as a service is the controls system, the hosting, the software, all provided on a contractual basis. Probably the best example of that is the City of Copenhagen, which has a very successful installation where the council owns the luminaires, but a contracted service provides all of the smart control devices in behind that. So what we're saying here is these things are emergent. How appropriate they are for the Australian New Zealand market is for the procuring organisation to decide, but we're certainly supporting the ability to accommodate such business models. The procurement structure. An important aspect is the ability to procure from a range of suppliers. In earlier days with street lighting controls, it was generally a necessary thing to procure from one company, a bundled package including software, central management system, software and networks and field devices. That is becoming less and less of a mandatory option now. And many organizations, including the Municipal Solid State Lighting Consortium in the USA, are saying that it's more appropriate for a procuring body to be able to mix and match suppliers within what they're calling a three-layer approach, where it's an unbundling of the various elements and buyers can actually procure on a mix and match basis, and the model specification accommodates such an approach, but equally it accommodates the bundled package if that's what is best or what's required for that region. The content sections of the model spec, we've color-coded these just to differentiate them. The specification is divided into I'll call it the procurement and probity side of things, the submitted documents and what is actually being procured. The blue sections in the middle, 4, 5 and 6, are for the equipment, software, communications network, commonly called the backhaul communication network, which comprises, it could be a cellular telephone system, it could be working on that, or it could be part of the procurement packages, gateways or network devices. And field devices, finally, are the plug-in devices which plug into the luminaire with a NEMA 7-pin device or similar. Also, installation and commissioning is important. We're buying an IT system. We're specifying and procuring an IT system in effect, so making sure that is installed and commissioned appropriately is a vital element, and likewise ongoing maintenance, and the model specification has guidance in all of these areas. The procurement content is, quickly we'll just run through this. The warranty requirement and options are included there. Are the options to be of X or Y years, and bear in mind that longer warranties are more of a cost for someone, so longer is not necessarily better. We're seeking advisory input, part of the consultation on this, what is appropriate, but also a suite of templates for procurement, taking into account the control system technical performance parameters, pricing information, and supplier information referees, etc., and the procurement template for warranty details. It's an important aspect to consider in light of the vendor fatigue that can happen and tender fatigue with the work it takes to engage in a tender. We're looking at asking for tender documentation only if shortlisted. So only if a supplier gets down to the shortlist are they requested to provide all of the lab reports and various other documents. We have checklists available for a declaration, signed declaration from the supplier ensuring, stating that they do have all this documentation, and they'll be requested to supply it if and when they meet the shortlist. So I think that's a good time to stop and take some more questions. So Graham and Godfrey, are there any questions to address at this point?
There are,
Brian, Brian, I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of background on what Auckland City Council did, as it's the largest smart controls deployment in our part of the world, in terms of unbundling the three layers that you just discussed, because I think it's a really good local example.
It is indeed. 44,000 units are what Auckland Transport are in the middle of rolling out at the moment. I think it's about 22,000 are installed at the moment and operating, and it is an unbundled package of software, network service, network equipment, and NEMA 7 based plug-in controls. So yes, that was a requirement of Auckland Transport. They went out to tender, and they have a mix and match approach with 3 different suppliers in those 3 levels, and they have tailored a procurement tender, which became a supply contract for different manufacturers at those 3 different levels. All is going very well, I believe, and that was a particular requirement for seeking appropriate levels of competitor competition, and also the ability to risk manage the system as time goes on, with the ability to purchase or replace different elements layer by layer over forthcoming years to upgrade and keep the system current. So it's a process in action, and it is more complex, of course, than one vendor, but it does give a range of options that certain vendors, including Auckland Transport, were looking for.
Brian,
so, yes, carry on.
There's a question from Scott, which I'll read out, but it needs a little bit of interpretation. With technology changes, are we now seeing life of the luminaires now reducing, e.g. Los Angeles looking at replacing 7 to 8 year old LED luminaires? And of course Ed Ibrahimian was discussing replacement of LED luminaires not because of its lifetime coming to an end, but its technology coming to an end, so to speak.
Well, yes, it's a fascinating question and a scenario, but a very real one. And the question becomes, will a DNSP or a municipality wish to change their LED luminaires because they have to, because something's not right, either worn out, or do they elect to do so because they wish to buy into another sphere of technology which they see as value to them? And certainly in the Los Angeles case, I'd liken it to the cell phone, a cell phone situation that we all experience ourselves. Do we acquire our next cell phone because our old one has actually failed to work, or do we acquire it because we're desirous of a range of features and functionality which our old one didn't have? And that was the case with the City of Los Angeles, and they've clearly done cost-benefit analyses to see that moving on to different luminaires after a relatively short period of time was worth their while. So it's an interesting and challenging question, Scott, and whether one considers it wait to move on to new luminaires after a relatively short period of time, or whether it's a good thing to be able to upgrade to a whole range of different functionality is really a moot point. So yep, it's something that procurement parties will need to manage as time goes on, but I think it will challenge us, our thinking anyway, into the future. So it's a very interesting question. So if there's no more, I should move on.
There is actually
Yes.
one from Kudus.
Yes.
And one important issue is that the DNSPs need to accept the lighting controls as a standard metering device. This will help in the uptake of these technologies a lot.
Yes, that's certainly correct, Kudus, and that is one of the barriers to uptake of improved technology such as smart controls. The acceptance of metering via an ICT-based system is something that isn't yet available in Australia. Certain parts of the UK and the US have gone down this path, but as part of the wider SLSC program, this issue is on the agenda to work with various stakeholder parties to break down these barriers. But yes, quite right, Kudus, you have identified a barrier, certainly an economic barrier to uptake, because if we can't monetize the energy savings that comes from investment in smart controls, it provides a damper to the uptake from a financial investment point of view. So it is work in progress, and the SLSC program, hopefully it will be addressing this in the not too distant future. Okay, I think we should move on. Time's running against us. This slide is about managing risk and keeping future options open. The diagram to the right is one that some of you will see. Have seen before. It's used in European Commission documentation. They call it the humble lamppost, which is really tongue-in-cheek because the lamppost depicted is not so humble, and what it's really depicting is a range of added value options that could be and are being added by various councils in different parts of the world and municipalities with updating their luminaires to added value items. So what we're really saying here is, in the early stages of procurement, the model specification is hoping to guard against, or future-proofing, hoping to guard against reducing technical and commercial options of the future and failing to allow for evolution of attributes and updates which may limit project scope and come up with suboptimal performance outcomes. So it's really saying the model specification is going to flag and highlight various options that a purchasing agency should consider, so they're not backed into a corner and end up with relatively obsolete infrastructure equipment within a few short years. So the consultation process as part of SLSC is something that we are very keen to engage with you people on the webinar today, and also the technical advisory group and the council and the wider market. So we're absolutely looking for feedback from a range of stakeholders. Suppliers, obviously, the internationals and the locals have a strong stake in this, but the buyers, the councils and the DNSPs, what are your needs? We really want to find out what your fears are, your opportunities might be, so we can weave the procurement of these into a specification. And likewise, contractors. The term a contractor is going now way beyond simply an electrical installation contract. These are ICT projects that we're engaging in, and it needs suitably encompassing and higher level contractors who are, can encompass the complexities. So this is our final stop point, just wrapping up before we conclude. So Graham and Godfrey, are there any questions before we move on to the conclusions?
There is one from Vimal who's asked, will there be a section within the specification for the selection of color temperature based on the type of street, location, etc. He's obviously referring to the luminaire control, the luminaire model spec.
Yes, the short answer is VML is not in this specification document, but in the previous one, the LED lighting one, that certainly has advisory sections and elective sections on color temperature. It's an important aspect, a very topical one, but it's not so much related to control, so it's not in this particular model spec. Okay, let's moving on. So consultation, we've got a list of hot topics here that we're particularly seeking input and feedback on. It is by no means exhaustive, and it simply just captures some of the higher level areas that we are seeking your feedback on. The three-layer procurement approach of software, network devices and field devices is something that's fundamental to this model spec. So we'd like to know whether that's supported or not by the buyers in particular. Also, communication system neutral approach. There is some information on the communications approaches and guidance as to its strong areas and less strong areas, but we don't purport to be radio frequency, power line and cell phone experts in this area, so we seek the input of those who are. And we've already had some excellent input from some of the suppliers, both local and international, shaping the way that we are staging this particular area. But the communications platform, the network communications, are a vital part of the controls choices. So that's probably a very, very major point. Additional aspect to consider is GPS functionality within control systems. There's very mixed feelings on this, some absolute advocates and some saying they don't need it. GPS devices are embedded in the plug-in NEMA devices which plug into the luminaires and have significant asset management advantages, but they also come at additional costs. So we'd love to hear feedback on whether that cost benefit is appropriate. Also, where the ICT services actually held or hosted. Is it a preference for on-site with various councils or DNSPs to manage that themselves, or are there no issues or problems with cloud hosted? We want to know. And finally, warranties. What is appropriate in this area? This is a technical commercial crossover. There's no rights or wrongs, and longer warranties, stronger warranties are not necessarily better. It's a bit like insurance policies. Over-insurance is a cost and perhaps a waste. So we're looking for that sweet spot of where the warranties might be subject to the actual risks rather than perceived risks. So please come back with your feedback on those particular areas. And as far as implementation is concerned, the model spec coming out within a month or so will be free to all stakeholders via the website, released in late May, and IPWEA will then evaluate the demand for training processes and education that will inevitably be required in order to deeply go into the Q&A side of things, and will undoubtedly come up with some sort of training program customized to the needs and responses that we get back. So model specs, in conclusion, are the living documents and the periodic updates, which will happen from time to time, subject to technological and other developments. It's absolutely essential that you as stakeholders participate to help improve the documentation. No one is an expert in the a singular expert in the broad range of inputs that are needed. We are all experts in certain areas and specialists in certain areas, but by no means all of them. So we wish to aggregate that information, and your participation is needed. And the momentum and uptake of the success of the model specification as it influences buyers and vendors over time will only come from adoption by users. So please use it. And finally, a thank you to the supporters and sponsors, the Department of Environment and Energy, who have been a a foundation stakeholder in the SLSC program. Thank you again. And also to the technical and commercial inputs, advice and guidance from the SLSC Council and the Technical Advisory Group. We've incorporated a good range of their inputs, and we're certainly looking for more. So thank you again. This is concluding the webinar, and thank you for your participation.
Bryan, there's 2 more questions. I wonder whether you could answer.
Certainly, far away.
In fact, as I look, another one's come. Scott has asked, in the domestic market, we have LED downlights where the color temperature is changed by controls. Is this occurring in street lighting, and should it be part of the model spec?
Very good point. Yes, indeed. Everyday products are available for the domestic and commercial market now, variably known as color tuning or color temperature modification. And this is not the future. This is now. And so Scott's question about, is this appropriate to outdoor public lighting? Don't know is the answer to that, and we'd like to hear from stakeholders whether they think that would be of value. As far as I'm aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't any of the major suppliers offering color temperature tuning now as an option. I'm sure that it could be achieved if there was sufficient market demand, but generally speaking, color temperatures are chosen in public lighting for a certain requirement, and those needs don't terribly much change. Unlike interior lighting, we're going from morning to evening, lights are on during the day and at night, and therefore adapting the color temperature is entirely appropriate. But when we are only using the public lighting at night, my personal view is that it's not really terribly advantageous to be able to change or tune that if the appropriate color temperature selection is handled correctly in the first place.
So another question from Scott, very, very, very important one, which I have strong views on, but you are answering the questions. Another hot topic is the ownership of the data. What do you think, who do you think should own the data, Bryan?
Well, what this is, we have data of a certain type of an asset management nature, which is part and parcel of running a system, an inventory system for public lighting. That is the energy consumed, the hours operated, all those sorts of things. And really, the asset owner typically would be the owner of that data, because that helps them own that, helps them manage that asset better. So if, say, a DNSP owned the asset, I would imagine that operational asset management type information will be owned by the DNSP. Conversely, as time moves on and we get into various smart controls, sensors, data capture devices, where weather conditions or traffic flow, such like, can be captured as part of the control system, I would, my personal views only, I would lobby that that needs to be owned by the ultimate payer of those services, which will be the council. Traffic management is a responsibility of councils. Delivering a safe environment and a safe community is the responsibility, both legally and financially, of the council. So I would suggest that they would need to be the asset owner, or certainly have rights of access to that data. So this is going to create some fascinating debate as time goes on, where these elastic sorts of issues will be debated, and emergent patterns will come through. But at the moment, it's all greenfields thinking. There is no rights or wrongs, because we haven't yet confronted these sorts of things in any quantitative, in any substantive way, because the uptake of controls that can do all this sort of stuff hasn't yet really occurred in any material way. So fodder for the future, but it'll create intriguing debate. But the value of that data is going to be substantial, either financially, socially, or safety-wise. And the takeaway, I think, to procurement bodies, be they councils or DNSPs, is think about the value of that data. And even if you can't put a financial value on that, certainly put a qualitative value on that, and don't give the rights to that data away unknowingly. So
Bryan, I think that there's another question from Kudus, but Scott has just made the point that there should be an option in the spec, and I think he makes a very good point that the spec should draw attention to the two types of data you mentioned.
Yes,
and,
yes, indeed. Yep, no, that's duly noted. We have some information in there, but I think sort of an expansion of that could well be worthwhile. So
there's a few more questions coming in. Kudus has asked, do you foresee the phasing out of street lighting with fully automated cars, as the computer on board will not need the road to be lit? Darn good point.
We are lighting even vehicular roads for the drivers, and if you don't have a driver, why are you lighting it? So it's a fascinating insight, question. And some of the people who I've spoken to overseas and visitors to Australia and New Zealand from overseas, when that type of question is posed, is that there will still be people around. There will still be people in and around those traffic movements, crossing the roads and using shared pathways, cycles, etc., etc. So my guess, and it's only a guess, Kudus, is that there will be way more emphasis in the future on lighting for people rather than lighting for vehicles. And what exactly that means in detail is who knows, but looking at the subjective side of lighting, the eye-brain interface of humans becomes a whole lot more important than, and things like color temperature and color tuning and all that come into play. So I think it will shift the requirement for public lighting rather than eliminate it, is my stance.
Bryan, Robert here. We have one final question, and then I'd like to make a comment in wrapping up if I could, giving out time.
Yeah.
The question is from Belinda in Adelaide City Council, and the question is, will the specification allow for full transparency of control application fees, such as a cost per node per year?
The answer to that is absolutely yes. How that is done, we have a range of elective options there that change depending on the business model elected and the type of technology that's elected or selected, I should say. But your main question, Belinda, transparency of costs is a vitally important underpinning, and the costs can come wrapped up in a range of different clothing. It can be CapEx cost, it can be ongoing running costs, but expressed in different ways, and it can be really quite difficult to compare apples with apples because of these differences. But the underlying tenet behind the model specification is for complete disclosure of the real, full and complete costs, be they on day one or on over years X, Y and Z. And we also have mechanisms in the specification for identifying year-by-year cost escalations, so one is not buying into a contract that might have some poison pill clauses in there which reduce the value for money balance later down the track. So full disclosure, absolutely yes, tailored to the different types of packages that are under consideration.
Bryan, if I could add a comment in conclusion for you to, just before you do your final thank you. One of the most important things in this particular webinar, and this specification even more so perhaps in the lighting one, is that the users are coming from a very low knowledge base. We acknowledge that to be existing in the market. What is most important as part of the TAG group, and I know there are a number of councils who are members of the TAG, and part of their contribution to advancing this is to actually comment from their experiences and their expectations of what would be contained in such a document, particularly the smart controls document specification. So whilst we will be relying upon the technical efficacy of the commercial operators and their knowledge, equally as important, and perhaps to a degree even more so, is what the users actually want from the specification. Given that most councils in Australia will not have much idea about what they should be asking for, we will be relying heavily upon those councils who are members of the TAG to comment and give us feedback on not only this control specification, but of course also the lighting one. So I think that level of leadership and early adoption is a really critical point for us to get this right, to provide the leadership for the rest of councils, DNSPs and road utilities across Australia. So I think it's a very important point that everyone just takes it on board, that people who are on this webinar at the moment and the TAG members are the early adopters, the ones who have the best knowledge that can contribute to making this document a worthwhile, meaningful and more importantly useful document as a leadership document for all of Australia to lift to a best practice model that was there. Back to you, Bryan.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Terribly important and relevant insights, and you know, coming from in our part of the world a low user knowledge base, and we're all learning. No one's an expert. We're trying to capture a range of specialist input from local and overseas. So putting that learnings and input into a common pot is a very appropriate way forward. The SLSC initiative is technology neutral, it's commercially neutral, and hopefully that will be the information pot that we can all take forward and to learn and implement and accelerate the uptake for the savings and the advantages that we wish to achieve. So it's your document, it's your inputs are vital. Watch the space on the SLSC website, and there'll be a lot of information coming through over the forthcoming month. So thank you again for your participation, and those are the questions from the questioners. And also I'd just like to acknowledge Chris Johnson from Talenza, who mentioned about picking us up on a point about technical statement we made about a certain technology type. We do appreciate your input, and we'll have some things which we'll have, hopefully we get it mostly right. Some things we might make oversights or omissions on or be slightly out of date, and we're very much interested in your guidance, perhaps corrections, and we will enthusiastically take them on board. So thank you all again, and we look forward to engaging with you at some time in the future. Thank you.